I'm Major Michelle Torres, 33 years old, Air Force Security Forces. I spent over a decade leading teams in war zones and came home with medals and instincts that kept me alive. For years, I gave everything to my family: support, stability, even silence about what service really costs. But when they laughed after I hit the ground during fireworks, filming it like a joke, something in me changed. Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by people who should have protected you? If so, you're not alone. Before I tell you what happened next, drop where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being misunderstood, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries, dignity, and taking your power back, because what came after that night might surprise you. The next morning came too early. I woke at 05:30, my internal clock still running on military time despite months of being home. The house was quiet. Through my window, I could see the backyard, littered with the debris of last night's party. Abandoned cups, folded chairs, the unlit fireworks still sitting in their boxes at the far end of the lawn. I went for a run. 5 miles through streets I'd known my whole life, past houses where I'd trick-or-treated as a kid, the high school where I'd graduated, the park where Jake and I used to play. Everything familiar. Everything foreign. By the time I got back, Jake's truck was in the driveway. He was sitting on the porch steps, coffee in hand, looking like he hadn't slept. "Hey," he said as I approached. "Hey, can we talk?" I sat down beside him, close enough for conversation but maintaining distance. The morning air was already getting humid, promising another scorcher. Jake stared into his coffee like it held answers. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," he started. "I know. But I did anyway." "Yeah, you did." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mark stayed after you went inside. Told me some things. About his deployments. About what it's like over there." He looked at me. "Why didn't you ever tell me any of that? Would you have listened?" That landed. I saw it hit him, saw him flinch. I thought I was being a good brother. Keeping things light. Not making a big deal out of stuff. I thought that's what you wanted. What I wanted was for someone to see me. Not the old version of me you remember, and not some stereotype of what you think a soldier is. Just me. As I am now. I don't know how to do that. I know. That's the problem. Jake rubbed his face, exhausted. Everyone's talking about what happened. My phone's been blowing up. Half the people there last night are asking if you're okay. The other half think Mark overreacted. Mark told the truth. That's all. Yeah, but he made it sound like we were attacking you or something. We were just having fun. And there it was. The thing that made this all so hard. They genuinely didn't understand. In their minds, they'd been celebrating and I'd overreacted, and Mark had made them feel bad about something that wasn't supposed to be serious. The disconnect was total. "Jake, I hit the ground because 13 years of training told me to. That wasn't a choice. That was my body doing what it's been conditioned to do when it perceives a threat. You laughing at that, filming it, that wasn't fun for me. That was humiliating. I get that now. I do. I'm sorry." He looked genuinely miserable. "But I don't know how to fix it." "You can't. Not immediately. But you can stop treating my service like it's either a joke or something that doesn't matter. You can stop testing my reactions to see what's funny. You can maybe consider that the person who came home isn't the same person who left, and that's okay." He nodded slowly. We sat there in silence, drinking coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mark came out of his house, saw us, raised a hand. Jake waved back, tentative. "He's a good guy," Jake said. "Kind of intense though. He's a Marine who's seen combat. Intense comes with the territory." "You like him?" I glanced at Jake. "As a neighbor? As someone who understands things most people don't?" "Yeah, I like him fine." "Why?" "Just wondering." Jake stood, stretched. "I gotta get to work." "But Michelle?" "I am sorry." "Really?" "I know." He left. I sat there a while longer, watching the morning light change. Mom came out eventually, still in her bathrobe, confused about something. She thought it was Tuesday. I gently reminded her it was Saturday. She smiled, embarrassed, went back inside to get dressed. The dementia was getting worse. Some days she was sharp. Other days she floated in a fog of misplaced time. I spent the morning cleaning up from the party, filling trash bags with cups and paper plates, folding chairs, coiling the string lights Jake had hung. When I got to the fireworks, I stopped. 6 large mortars still sitting in their boxes unused. I stared at them for a long time, these objects that had caused so much distress. They were just cardboard and chemicals. The fear was all mine. Mark appeared at the fence line. Need help? I got it. But thanks. He climbed over anyway, started helping without asking again. We worked in companionable silence, the way people who understand each other can. When the backyard was clean, we sat at the picnic table. You didn't have to do that last night, I said. Step in like that. Yes, I did. Why? Because I've been where you are. Got home in 2016, moved back to my hometown. Family thought they were being supportive by not asking questions, not making a big deal out of things. But that just meant I was alone with it. Every reaction, every moment of hypervigilance, every night I couldn't sleep, I dealt with it by myself because nobody wanted to acknowledge it was real. He looked at me. You needed someone to say it was real. So I did. Jake's upset. Jake's learning. That's different than being upset. The family thinks you made a scene. I stated a fact. If that made them uncomfortable, that's their issue to work through. I appreciated his bluntness. No softening, no apology for speaking truth. It was refreshing after so many conversations where everyone danced around the hard stuff. You go to any of the veterans groups around here? He asked. Didn't know there were any. There's one that meets every other Thursday at the VFW hall. Mixed branches, mixed eras. Some Vietnam guys, some Gulf War, lots of post, 9/11. Good people. Real conversations. He pulled out his phone, sent me a text with the details. Next meeting's this Thursday at 1900 hours. You should come. I don't know. I'm not really a joiner. Neither am I. But sometimes it helps to be around people who don't need the explanation. Who just get it. After he left, I sat with that idea. A room full of veterans, all carrying their own weight, all understanding the things that didn't translate into civilian language. Part of me wanted that. Needed it, maybe. But another part of me resisted. Going to a veterans group felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit, that I needed help adjusting, that I couldn't handle this on my own. Mom called me inside for lunch. We ate sandwiches at the kitchen table, and she told me about her book club, the same story she'd told me yesterday and the day before. I listened like it was new. That's what you do with dementia. You meet them where they are. Your brother feels terrible, she said suddenly, lucid again. About last night. He should. Michelle, honey, he didn't mean any harm. Mom, intention doesn't erase impact. He hurt me. The fact that he didn't mean to doesn't make it hurt less. She looked down at her plate. I just want my children to get along. We'll get there. But not by pretending it didn't happen. That afternoon, I drove to the VFW hall Mark had mentioned. Didn't go inside, just sat in the parking lot, looking at the building. It was old, well-maintained, with flags flying out front and a sign announcing the various groups that met there. I thought about walking in, introducing myself, seeing what Thursday's meeting would be like. Instead, I sat there for 20 minutes, then drove home. I wasn't ready yet. Maybe Thursday I would be. Or maybe I'd need more time. Either way, it was good to know the option existed. That there was a place where my reactions wouldn't be entertainment, where my training would be understood as the valuable thing it was, where I wouldn't have to translate my experience into something palatable for people who'd never lived it. That evening, Jake came by again. He'd brought flowers, which was awkward and sweet in equal measure. For Mom, he said. And to say sorry. Again. We sat on the porch. He asked questions this time, real ones. What was it like leading a convoy? How did I make decisions under pressure? What did I miss most about being deployed? I answered honestly, not editing for his comfort. And he listened, actually listened, in a way he never had before. I think I was scared, he admitted as the sun set. Of what you'd become. Of not recognizing you anymore. So I tried to make you fit back into the box I remembered. The little sister who used to steal my skateboard and put way too much sugar on her cereal. That person's still in here. She's just not the only person in here anymore. Yeah, I'm starting to get that. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. A foundation we could maybe build on if we both tried. He left around 2100 hours, and I went inside to help Mom with her evening routine. She was having a bad night, confused about where Dad was, not understanding that he'd been gone for over a decade. I guided her gently back to the present, helped her get ready for bed, sat with her until she fell asleep. Then I went in my room, pulled out my laptop, and looked up the veterans group Mark had mentioned. Found their website, read about their mission, saw photos from past events. Everyone in those pictures looked normal. Happy even. People who'd served, who'd come home, who'd found a way to exist in both worlds. I marked Thursday on my calendar. Didn't commit fully, but didn't rule it out either. Just left it there as a possibility. And that felt like enough for now. Small steps forward. That's all anyone could ask. Thursday came. I almost didn't go. Changed my clothes 3 times, talked myself in and out of it a dozen ways. But at 1845, I was in my car, driving to the VFW hall, telling myself I could always just sit in the parking lot again if I lost my nerve. Mark's truck was already there when I arrived. That helped somehow, knowing he'd be inside. I walked in at 1858 right on time, following signs to a room in the back. About 20 people were there already, sitting in a loose circle of folding chairs, talking and laughing. Mixed ages, mixed branches, exactly like Mark had described. He saw me come in, nodded, gestured to an empty chair beside him. I sat. A few people glanced over, offering friendly smiles, but not making a big deal about a newcomer. The informality of it was disarming. I'd expected something more structured, more official. This felt more like people gathering because they wanted to, not because they had to. At 1900 hours exactly, a man in his 50s stood up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a calm authority that spoke of years of leadership. Evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Sam Price, Army Sergeant Major, retired. Let's get started. The meeting was simple. People shared if they wanted to, stayed quiet if they didn't. There was no pressure, no judgment. A woman named Angela talked about struggling with crowds at her daughter's soccer games. A younger guy, couldn't have been more than 25, mentioned having a hard week at his new job, feeling like his coworkers didn't understand why he couldn't just relax during the company's surprise birthday celebration that involved popping balloons. People nodded, offered advice, shared their own similar experiences. The understanding in the room was palpable. These were people who didn't need explanations, who didn't require you to translate military life into civilian terms. They'd lived it. They got it. We have someone new tonight, Sam said, looking at me. You want to introduce yourself? Major Michelle Torres, Air Force, Security Forces. Just moved back to the area. Welcome, Major. Glad you're here. That was it. No pressure to share more, no intrusive questions. Just acknowledgement and welcome. The meeting continued, covering various topics, upcoming veterans events, someone's VA appointment saga, a fundraiser being planned. I listened more than I talked, getting a feel for the group's dynamic. After the official meeting ended at 2000 hours, people lingered, talking in smaller clusters. A woman in her 30s approached me. Captain Rachel, well, civilian now, but old habits. Army logistics. Got out 2 years ago. How's the transition been? Rough at first. Better now. This group helped a lot. She gestured around the room. It's nice to be around people who understand that, how are you, is actually a real question, not just pleasantry. Mark joined US, introduced me to a few more people. By 2100 hours, I'd talked to at least a dozen veterans, exchanged numbers with a few, made tentative plans to grab coffee with Rachel sometime. The casualness of it all, the ease of connection with people I'd just met, highlighted how difficult connection had been with my own family. On the drive home, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a sense of belonging. These people understood the specific weight of service, the strange space between worlds that veterans occupy. With them, I didn't have to perform or explain or minimize. I could just be. Jake called while I was driving. I answered on Bluetooth. Hey, where were you? Mom was asking. Veterans group meeting. Oh, how was it? Good. Really good, actually. Silence on his end. Then, that's great, Michelle. I'm glad. He meant it too. I could hear the genuine relief in his voice, the hope that maybe I was finding my footing here. We talked briefly about Mom. She'd had a good day, remembered to take her medication, watched her favorite show, and then he let me go. At home, Mom was already asleep. I checked on her, made sure she was comfortable, then went to my room. For the first time since I'd been back, I felt like maybe this could work. Maybe I could build a life here that honored both who I'd been and who I'd become. It wouldn't be the life I'd left behind, but it didn't have to be. It just had to be mine. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a new rhythm. Twice a week, I'd meet with other veterans from the group. Coffee with Rachel turned into regular lunches where we talked shop, military logistics versus combat operations, the different challenges our branches faced, the strange humor that only people who'd served understood. Mark and I started running together in the mornings, not talking much but appreciating the companionship. I also started volunteering at the VA hospital 2 towns over, helping younger veterans navigate the bureaucracy of benefits and healthcare. My years of military administration experience made me useful, and the work felt meaningful in a way civilian jobs never had. I was using my skills, helping people who needed it, staying connected to the military community without being on active duty. Jake and I were rebuilding slowly. He'd stopped making jokes about my service, stopped testing my reactions. Instead, he'd started asking real questions, showing genuine interest. One night, he showed up with a book he'd bought, a memoir by a female combat veteran. Thought this might help me understand better, he said, almost shy about it. I was touched by the effort. We still had a long way to go, but the fact that he was trying mattered. Mom's condition continued to deteriorate, and that became something Jake and I navigated together, a shared responsibility that helped rebuild our connection. Then, in late July, everything shifted again. I was at the grocery store when my phone blew up with notifications. Text messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. Facebook messages from acquaintances. All asking variations of the same thing. Is this you? I opened Facebook. The video was everywhere. Jake had posted it weeks ago, the night of July 4th, and it had stayed relatively contained to his friends list. But someone had shared it publicly, and it had gone viral. 30,000 shares. 50,000. The numbers kept climbing. The video showed me hitting the ground during the fireworks, showed everyone laughing, captured Jake's "calm down, it's just fireworks" comment. But it cut off before Mark's intervention. Without that context, it was just a video of a woman overreacting to fireworks while her family mocked her. The caption Jake had originally written was innocuous. Family fireworks got a little too real for my sis. But the shares had added new captions, new commentary. Some mocking, when you're too dramatic for real life. Some cruel, attention-seeking military wannabe. Some concerned, this is what PTSD looks like and they're laughing at her. I stood in the grocery store aisle, frozen, watching my worst moment become public entertainment. My phone kept buzzing. I turned it off, abandoned my cart, went home. Jake was already there when I arrived, pacing in the driveway. Michelle, I am so sorry. I took it down immediately when I saw it was being shared, but people had already downloaded it, and now it's everywhere, and I don't know how to stop it. I walked past him into the house. He followed, still talking, apologizing, explaining. I went to my room, closed the door, sat on my bed. The silence was complete except for Jake's continued apologies through the door, gradually fading as he realized I wasn't going to respond. 2 hours later, Mark knocked. Jake must have called him. I let him in. You okay? He asked. Not remotely. Want to talk about it? What's there to say? My brother posted a video of my trauma response being mocked by my family, and now millions of people are weighing in on it. Some think it's funny. Some think I'm faking. Some think my family's terrible. Everyone has an opinion about the worst moment of my life. Jake's devastated. He should be. Mark sat down in my desk chair. The video doesn't show what happened after. Doesn't show me explaining. Doesn't show your family realizing they'd messed up. It's incomplete. That's what makes it worse. Now I'm just the punchline with no context. We sat in silence for a while. Then Mark said, "You could provide the context. Tell your story. But on your terms, not theirs." I looked at him. "How?" "Local news has been trying to reach you." "I know the reporter, Alex Chen. Good person, veteran-friendly. You could do an interview. Explain what really happened, what service means, what it costs. Let people see the whole picture." That sounds like a nightmare. It would be. But it would also be you taking control of the narrative instead of letting everyone else write it for you. I thought about that. About stepping into the spotlight intentionally, about sharing parts of my story I'd kept private, about using this terrible moment as an opportunity to educate people who'd never understand otherwise. "I'll think about it," I said. Mark nodded, stood to leave. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back." After he left, I turned my phone back on. The messages had multiplied. But buried among them was one from Sam Price, the Army Sergeant Major from the Veterans Group. "A lot of us are seeing this video. We stand with you. Let us know if you need anything." Similar messages from other veterans I'd met. Rachel. Angela. People from the group I barely knew but who recognized me from the video and wanted me to know I wasn't alone. The military community had mobilized, was defending me in comment sections, providing context, pushing back against the mockery. I wasn't alone in this. That realization helped. I drafted a message to Alex Chen, the reporter Mark had mentioned. Set it up to send, but didn't hit the button yet. Needed to sleep on it, needed to be sure. Jake knocked on my door around 2200 hours. "Michelle? Can I come in?" "No. I know I screwed up. I know sorry doesn't fix it. But I'm trying to make this right. I've been commenting on every share, explaining what really happened, telling people about Mark's intervention. I'm doing everything I can. It's not enough. I know. But it's all I have." I heard him walk away, heard him talking to Mom downstairs, explaining in simplified terms that there was a problem with a video and Michelle was upset. Mom's confused questions. Jake's patient answers. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the interview. About whether exposing more of myself would help or just invite more judgment. About whether I owed the world an explanation or whether I owed myself privacy. No good answers. Just choices, each with their own consequences. Eventually, I sent the message to Alex Chen. "I'll do the interview. But I want editorial approval on what airs. And I want Mark Dalton included. He was there. He should tell his part too." The response came within minutes. Agreed. "How's Saturday at 1000 hours?" I confirmed. Turned off my phone. And tried to sleep, knowing that in 3 days, I'd be telling my story to people who might not want to hear it, might not believe it, might twist it into something it wasn't. But at least it would be my story. In my words. On my terms. Saturday morning arrived cold despite it being August. I'd barely slept, running through what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it. Mark picked me up at 0930. We drove to the local news station in silence, both of us understanding that words weren't necessary. Alex Chen met us in the lobby. Mid-30s, professional but warm, with an ease that suggested she'd done this many times before. "Major Torres, Sergeant Dalton, thank you for agreeing to this. I want you both to know, this isn't a gotcha piece. It's your story, told your way." She led us to a small studio setup. 2 chairs facing the camera, soft lighting, nothing intimidating. A makeup person offered to help, but I declined. I wanted to look like myself, not some polished version created for television. Mark did the same. "We'll start with some background," Alex explained. "Your service history, what brought you home, then move into what happened July 4th. Mark, I'll bring you in when it's relevant. The whole thing should run about 8 minutes when edited." "Any questions?" "Who decides what gets cut?" I asked. "We'll review it together before it airs. You'll have approval." That helped. We'd established ground rules, boundaries. This was still my story. The interview started simply. Alex asked about my service, and I explained, joining at 22, security forces, multiple deployments, rising to major. The years condensed into minutes, the complexity reduced to highlights. But even that summary conveyed the weight of it, the time invested, the experiences accumulated. "What was it like coming home after 13 years of service?" Alex asked. Disorienting. The military has its own language, its own culture. You spend years in that world, and it shapes how you think, how you react, how you process information. Coming back to civilian life means translating yourself constantly, explaining things that feel fundamental to who you are, but are completely foreign to people who haven't served. Did your family understand that? I paused, choosing words carefully. They wanted to understand. But wanting and understanding are different things. They saw me as the person who left, or the person they thought I should be. Not necessarily the person I'd become. Tell me about July 4th. I walked through it. The party, the fireworks, the moment Jake lit the mortar without warning. Describing how my body reacted before my brain could process what was happening, how 13 years of training took over in a split second. And your family's reaction? Alex asked gently. They laughed. Filmed it. Told me to calm down. Saying it out loud, on camera, made it real in a new way. Made me acknowledge how much it had hurt. That's when you intervened, Alex said, turning to Mark. Mark nodded. I was watching for my property. Saw the whole thing. Saw Major Torres react the way anyone with combat training would react to a sound that mimics incoming fire. And I saw her family turn it into entertainment. What made you speak up? Because I've been there. Not that specific situation, but that feeling of being home and having nobody understand what you carry. I knew if someone didn't say something, she'd internalize it. Believe maybe she was overreacting or broken or wrong for having the instincts that kept her alive. Someone needed to say it was real. What did you say? Alex asked. That her reaction saved my life in Kandahar. Because it did. Being able to hit the ground, cover up, react instantly when mortars came in, that's the difference between living and dying sometimes. It's not funny. It's survival. Alex turned back to me. The video of this incident went viral last week. Millions of people have seen it now, most without the context of what happened after. How has that affected you? It's been violating, I said honestly. Having the worst moment of my homecoming turned into public entertainment. Having people who know nothing about military service, nothing about PTSD or hypervigilance or combat training, having them judge whether my reaction was legitimate or attention-seeking. It's been hard. What do you want people to understand? I thought about that. About the thousands of veterans dealing with similar struggles, about the families who didn't know how to help, about the civilians who meant well but didn't have the framework to understand. I want people to understand that veterans don't come home the same as we left. We can't. The experiences we have, the training we receive, the things we see and do, they change us fundamentally. That's not damage. That's adaptation. We learn to survive in environments most people can't imagine, and those lessons don't just disappear because we're back in peaceful surroundings. I leaned forward slightly. When you see a veteran flinch at loud noises, or scan rooms for exits, or seem uncomfortable in crowds, that's not weakness. That's their brain doing what it was trained to do, keep them alive. Mocking that, filming it for entertainment, that's cruel. Even if you don't mean it to be. Even if you think it's harmless fun. What would you say to your brother if he were here? I'd say I know he didn't mean to hurt me. But impact matters more than intention. I'd say that posting that video, even just to his friends, showed a fundamental lack of understanding about what I went through and what I came home with. And I'd say that if we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be based on who I am now, not who I was before I left. Sergeant Dalton, what would you say to families of veterans who might be watching this? Mark considered the question. Ask questions. Real ones. Not, how was it, but what do you need? Not, you must be glad to be home, but how can I help you adjust? Listen to the answers even if they're uncomfortable. Understand that your veteran might need time, space, different approaches to social situations. That doesn't mean they're broken. It means they're processing complex experiences with tools that worked overseas, but don't always translate here. And to veterans who might be struggling with similar situations? Find your people, Mark said. Other veterans who get it without explanation. Support groups, online communities, even just one friend who served. You need people who understand the language of service, who won't make you translate every experience into civilian terms. That connection is vital. Alex wrapped up with some final questions about resources, about local veteran services, about where people could learn more. Then the cameras stopped, and it was over. That was powerful, Alex said. Really powerful. We'll have the edited version ready by tomorrow afternoon. I'll send it to you for review before we air Monday evening. We thanked her and left. In the parking lot, Mark and I stood by our cars for a moment. You did good in there, he said. You too. Thanks for backing me up. Always. I drove home, feeling exhausted but also lighter somehow. I'd told my story. Put it out there in my own words. Whether people listened or not, whether it changed anything or not, at least I'd tried. Jake was waiting on the porch when I got home. How'd it go? Airs Monday. You should watch it. I will. He hesitated. Michelle, I've been thinking. About everything. And I want you to know I'm going to do better. Not just say it, actually do it. I'm going to learn what I need to learn, ask the questions I should have asked before. I'm going to be the brother you deserve, not the one I've been. That's going to take time. I know. But I'm committed to it. I believed him. Finally. Not because his words were different, but because something in his tone had shifted. He'd seen the consequences of his ignorance, felt the weight of the hurt he'd caused. That kind of lesson changes people if they let it. Sunday, Alex sent the edited interview. I watched it 3 times, making minor notes, but mostly it was exactly what we'd recorded. The story told clearly, with context, with respect. I approved it for air. Monday evening, the segment ran during the 6 o'clock news. My phone started buzzing immediately, but this time the messages were different. Supportive. Understanding. Fellow veterans reaching out to say they'd experienced similar things. Civilians thanking me for explaining something they hadn't understood before. A few nasty comments mixed in, but mostly, people seemed to finally get it. The video of the fireworks incident was still out there, still circulating. But now when people shared it, others would link to the interview, providing context. Slowly, the narrative shifted from woman overreacts to fireworks to veteran coping with combat training. Not perfect, but better. Sam Price called Tuesday morning. That interview was exactly what needed to happen. You gave voice to things a lot of veterans feel but can't articulate. I've had 5 new people reach out about joining our group because of it. You're making a difference, Major. That helped. The exposure had been uncomfortable, but if it helped other veterans feel less alone, if it educated civilians who genuinely wanted to understand, then it was worth it. Jake came by Tuesday evening with Chinese takeout. We ate at the kitchen table with Mom, who was having a good day. She asked about the interview, and I gave her the simplified version. She patted my hand. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I don't always understand everything, but I'm proud. After dinner, Jake and I sat on the porch. The evening was cooling off, cicadas singing their late summer song. I watched the interview 3 times, Jake said. Showed it to my friends, to people at work. Made them watch it too. You don't have to do that. Yeah, I do. I put you in that situation. The least I can do is make sure people understand what really happened. He looked at me. You said some things about me in that interview. About needing to rebuild based on who you are now. I want to do that. I want to know this version of my sister, not keep trying to resurrect the old one. That means you'll have to hear things that might be uncomfortable. Stories that aren't easy. Truths about war that don't fit into neat boxes. I'm ready for that. Or I'm trying to be. We talked until the stars came out, real conversation for maybe the first time since I'd been home. He asked about deployments, about what leadership looked like in combat zones, about the friends I'd lost and the decisions I'd had to make. I answered honestly, not editing for his comfort. And he listened, really listened, without trying to fix anything or make it lighter or pretend it was less than it was. It wasn't forgiveness yet. The hurt from July 4th, from the viral video, from years of being minimized, that would take longer to heal. But it was a foundation. A place we could build from if we both kept trying. August faded into September, and with it came a slow shift in how people in town saw me. The interview had aired on the local news, but clips of it had been picked up by larger outlets. Military blogs shared it. Veterans organizations posted it on their social media. Suddenly, I wasn't just Jake Torres' sister who'd been in the military. I was Major Michelle Torres, someone with a story that resonated. The attention was uncomfortable at first. People I barely knew would stop me at the grocery store to thank me for speaking out. Veterans would approach me at the VA hospital where I volunteered, sharing their own struggles with reintegration. Civilians would ask careful, thoughtful questions, genuinely wanting to understand something the interview had sparked in them. But with the attention came opportunity. Sam Price called in early September with a proposal. There's a veterans advocacy group based in Richmond. They organize events, provide resources, help with transition services. They saw your interview and want to know if you'd be interested in speaking at their annual fundraiser. It's a big event, couple hundred people, including some state legislators. I'm not a public speaker, Sam. You did fine with that interview. And you wouldn't be alone. Mark agreed to speak too. They want both perspectives, officer and enlisted, Air Force and Marines, but both combat veterans dealing with similar reintegration challenges. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to retreat back into privacy, let the attention die down. But another part recognized that this was a chance to turn something painful into something useful. To advocate for veterans who didn't have a platform, who were struggling silently with families who didn't understand. When's the event? October 19th. 6 weeks to prepare. They'll help with talking points, but they want authentic voices, not scripted speeches. Let me talk to Mark. Mark was predictably calm about the whole thing when I called. Could be good. Reach a lot of people who need to hear it. Politicians especially. They vote on veterans' benefits and funding without really understanding what veterans deal with. You comfortable speaking in front of that many people? Comfortable? No. Willing to do it anyway? Yeah. We agreed. Over the next few weeks, we met regularly to prepare. Not to script our speeches, but to clarify what we wanted to say, what messages mattered most. Rachel from the Veterans Group helped too, offering insights from her own transition experience. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jake continued to improve gradually. He started coming to some of the Veterans Group meetings, not as a participant, but as an observer. Sitting quietly in the back, listening to conversations that helped him understand what I and others dealt with. After one meeting where a younger veteran broke down describing his difficulty connecting with his wife, Jake was quiet on the drive home. I had no idea, he said finally. I mean, I knew it was hard. But I didn't really know. Most people don't. That guy talking about feeling like an alien in his own house? About his wife thinking he was being distant when he was really just trying to process too many stimuli at once? That's what it's been like for you, isn't it? Sometimes. Yeah. He was quiet for another mile. I wish you'd told me. I tried, Jake. In 100 small ways. But you weren't ready to hear it until recently. I'm hearing it now. I know. That's what matters. Mom's condition worsened as fall deepened. The good days became rarer, the confusion more persistent. She'd forget I'd ever left home, then remember and ask when I was deploying again, trapped in a timeline that didn't match reality. Jake and I navigated it together, tag-teaming her care, making decisions about her treatment, planning for the inevitable decline. In the midst of that, preparing for the fundraiser's speech felt almost therapeutic. A chance to focus on something productive, something that gave meaning to the struggles we were discussing. Mark and I met at coffee shops, reviewing notes, refining our messages. We decided to structure it as a conversation rather than two separate speeches, playing off each other's experiences to show both commonalities and differences across branches and ranks. Rachel attended one of our practice sessions, offering feedback. You're both too formal, she said. This isn't a military briefing. Tell stories. Make it personal. That's what connected with people in your interview, Michelle. The personal truth of it. She was right. We adjusted, weaving in specific moments. Mark talked about coming home and having his nephew run up behind him yelling, how he'd spun around with his fists up before he could stop himself. I talked about the grocery store incident, the balloons at family dinner, all the small moments that added up to a larger truth about how combat training rewired you. The week before the fundraiser, the original viral video resurfaced. Someone had created a compilation of military homecoming fails, and my moment was featured prominently. But this time, the comments were different. People posted links to the interview, explained the context, defended not just me but all veterans dealing with similar struggles. The narrative had shifted enough that the mockery couldn't take root the same way. Jake saw it and called immediately. "I'm reporting every version I find. Trying to get them taken down." "Don't worry about it, Jake. It's always going to be out there. But now there's context. That's the best we can hope for. I still hate that I put you in this position." "I know. But we're past that now. We're moving forward." The day of the fundraiser arrived gray and drizzly. October in Virginia, that in-between weather that couldn't decide if it was still fall or early winter. Mark and I drove to Richmond together, both of us quiet with nerves. The event was at a hotel conference center, professionally organized with tables for dinner, a stage with microphones, all the trappings of a formal fundraiser. Sam was there early, helping coordinate. "Relax," he told us. "You know this stuff. Just tell the truth." Easier said than done. As people filed in, veterans, family members, politicians, community leaders, the weight of what we were about to do settled in. This wasn't just telling our stories. This was representing all the veterans who couldn't or wouldn't speak up, giving voice to struggles that too often stayed private. Dinner was served first. Mark and I barely ate, too nervous. But we made small talk with people at our table, including a state senator who asked thoughtful questions about veterans services and a retired Army colonel who told us stories from Vietnam that made our own experiences feel like yesterday. The continuity of it struck me. Different wars, different eras, but the same struggles with reintegration, the same gaps in understanding between those who served and those who didn't. After dinner, the organization's director gave opening remarks, thanking donors and outlining their mission. Then she introduced us. Major Michelle Torres and Staff Sergeant Mark Dalton represent two branches, two ranks, two different service experiences. But their stories of coming home share common threads that we all need to hear. Please welcome them. We walked to the stage. 2 stools, 2 microphones, positioned for conversation. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see much of the audience, which helped. Mark started, as we'd planned. "I came home from my last deployment in 2016. Thought I was prepared. Did all the transition classes, all the briefings. But nothing really prepares you for the moment when you realize the world you're returning to doesn't operate by the rules you've lived by for years." He talked about his first week home, going to a crowded mall with his sister and having a panic attack because there were too many people, too many variables he couldn't control. About his family thinking he just needed rest, not understanding that rest wasn't the issue. Then I picked up the thread. "I came home earlier this year after 13 years of service. Multiple deployments, leadership positions, career I was proud of. But coming home to care for my mother, reconnecting with family, that was harder than any mission I'd led overseas." I told them about the fireworks incident, walking through it clearly, letting them understand what happened and why. My brother didn't mean to hurt me. My family wasn't trying to be cruel. But their ignorance, their inability to understand that my reactions weren't funny or dramatic, but were actually evidence of training that saved lives, that hurt more than any physical wound I'd received in combat. Mark nodded. "That's the invisible injury. Not PTSD necessarily, though that's real too. But the fundamental change that happens when you're trained for combat. Your brain rewires. Your nervous system adapts. You become someone who can survive in extreme conditions. And then you come home, and people expect you to just switch it off." "You can't switch it off," I said. "You can learn to manage it, to recognize when your training is useful and when it's creating problems. But you can't erase it. And asking veterans to do that, to pretend they're not carrying what they carry, that's where the real damage happens." We alternated like that for 20 minutes, building on each other's points, showing both the commonalities and differences in our experiences. Mark talked about the enlisted perspective, the different pressures and expectations. I talked about leadership burden, making decisions that affected other people's lives, carrying responsibility that didn't end when you came home. Then we opened it up to the audience for questions. A woman in her 50s stood. "My son served in Afghanistan. He's been home 3 years, and we still can't connect the way we used to. What should I do?" Mark answered. "Ask him what he needs, not what you think he should need. Let him tell you when he's ready to talk, and listen without trying to fix it or make it better. Sometimes just acknowledging that things are hard, that's enough. A younger veteran asked, "How do you deal with people who dismiss what you're going through? Who think you're exaggerating or being dramatic?" "You find your people," I said. "Other veterans who understand without explanation. And you set boundaries with people who can't or won't understand. You don't owe everyone your story, and you don't owe anyone an apology for reactions that kept you alive." More questions came. About navigating VA services. About explaining military culture to civilian employers. About managing relationships when one person has combat experience and the other doesn't. Mark and I answered as best we could, drawing from our own experiences and the collective wisdom of veterans we'd known. Finally, the senator who'd been at our table stood. "What's the one thing you want people in positions like mine to understand? People who make policy decisions affecting veterans." I looked at Mark, and he nodded for me to take it. "Understand that when you vote on veterans' benefits, on healthcare funding, on transition services, you're making decisions that directly affect whether veterans can successfully reintegrate. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for support that recognizes the unique challenges of transitioning from military to civilian life. Programs that address not just physical injuries, but the invisible ones. Services that help families understand what their veterans are dealing with. And respect. Just basic respect for the service we gave and the price we still pay." The audience applauded. Not the polite applause of duty, but genuine, sustained recognition. As Mark and I left the stage, people stood. The standing ovation felt overwhelming, undeserved somehow, but also validating. We'd told our truth, and people had listened. Afterward, we were surrounded by veterans and family members wanting to talk, to share their own stories, to thank us for speaking up. It took 2 hours to work through the crowd, and by the end, we were exhausted but also energized. This was work that mattered. Advocacy that made a difference. On the drive home, Mark said, "We should keep doing this. Not necessarily big events, but talking to groups, educating people. There's a need for it." Yeah, I agreed. There really is. When I got home, Jake was waiting up despite it being nearly midnight. "How'd it go?" "Good. Really good. Someone recorded it on their phone and it's already being shared online. In a good way this time." He smiled. "I'm proud of you, Michelle. Really proud." "Thanks, Jake." He stood, hesitated, then hugged me. A real hug, not the awkward side squeeze we'd been doing for months. "I'm glad you're home," he said. "Even though I made it hard." "I'm glad you're here." "Me too," I said. And meant it. That night, I lay in bed thinking about how far we'd come. From the humiliation of July 4th to standing on a stage in October, telling my story to people who needed to hear it. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over. Mom's decline would continue. The viral video would always exist somewhere online. My reactions to loud noises wouldn't disappear just because I'd explained them publicly. But I'd found my footing. Found a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. Found a way to turn pain into advocacy, to use my experience to help others. And I'd found people, Mark, Rachel, Sam, the whole veterans community, who understood without needing endless explanation. Jake was trying, genuinely trying, to be the brother I needed. We were rebuilding trust slowly, carefully, with new understanding. Mom wouldn't get better, but we were navigating her care together, united in purpose. The pieces of my post-military life were coming together. Not the life I'd imagined when I first came home, but a life that honored both my service and my present reality. A life that felt, finally, like mine. By November, speaking engagements had become a regular part of my life. Mark and I did 2 more events in October, then 3 in November. Schools wanting to educate students about veterans issues. Community organizations planning Veterans Day programming. Corporate groups trying to create more veteran-friendly workplaces. The demand surprised us both. "We've become the poster children for veteran reintegration struggles," Mark said one afternoon as we reviewed another speaking request. Is that a bad thing? No. Just strange. 6 months ago, I was the guy who kept to himself. Now I'm talking to strangers about my trauma twice a week. You can say no. We both can. I know. But it helps people. And honestly, it helps me too. Talking about it this much, it's like exposure therapy. The stories lose some of their power when you tell them enough times. He was right. The first few times I described the fireworks incident publicly, my heart raced and my hands shook. Now it was just facts, a story that happened to me but didn't control me. The repeated telling had created distance, turned raw wound into scar tissue. Rachel started joining us sometimes, adding her perspective on logistics and support roles versus combat arms. The three of us developed a rhythm, a way of bouncing off each other that made the presentations more dynamic. We weren't just lecturing. We were having conversations that audiences could be part of. Jake came to one of our presentations at a local high school, sat in the back with teachers and parents, watching as we talked to juniors and seniors about military service, what it meant, what it cost. Afterward, he waited until the crowd cleared, then approached. "That was powerful," he said. "Seeing you up there, in your element. You're good at this. Thanks. I realized something watching you three. You're not broken. You never were. You're just people who lived through extraordinary things and came home to ordinary places. The disconnect isn't your fault. It's ours for not understanding what you needed." It was the most insightful thing Jake had said since I'd been home. That's exactly it. I'm sorry it took me so long to get it. You're getting it now. That's what matters. Mom's condition deteriorated significantly in mid-November. She had a series of small strokes that accelerated the dementia, leaving her confused most of the time, often not recognizing Jake or me. We made the difficult decision to move her into a memory care facility. She needed round-the-clock supervision we couldn't provide at home, and the professionals assured us it was the right choice. It didn't feel right, though. Felt like abandonment, even though logically I knew it wasn't. Jake struggled with it too. We'd sit in her room at the facility, making one-sided conversation while she stared out the window or asked for our father who'd been dead for 15 years. "Is this what you deal with?" Jake asked me one evening after a particularly hard visit. "This feeling of losing someone even though they're still alive?" "Sometimes. With people I served with who didn't come home, or who came home too broken to really be present." "Yeah, it's similar. I don't know how you carry it all. You just do. Because what's the alternative?" In late November, I got a call from a documentary filmmaker. She'd seen our speaking engagements online, read about the viral video and the interview, and wanted to create a short documentary about veterans' reintegration challenges. 20 minutes, focused on your story, but contextualizing it within the larger veteran community. I want to show the gap between civilian and military worlds, how families can bridge it, what support actually looks like. I was hesitant. More exposure, more people examining the worst moments of my homecoming. But she sent me her previous work, a documentary about female veterans that was thoughtful, respectful, and deeply researched. The kind of journalism that educated without exploiting. "I'll do it if Mark and Jake agree to participate," I told her. "And if you include information about resources, not just problems." "Absolutely. I want this to be useful, not just sad." Mark agreed easily. Jake took more convincing. He didn't want to be portrayed as the villain of my story. But when I explained that his journey from ignorance to understanding was actually one of the most important parts, that showing how families could learn and grow mattered more than protecting his image, he came around. The filming happened over 2 weeks in December. Cameras followed me through daily routines, volunteering at the VA, attending veterans group meetings, speaking at a small corporate event. They filmed Mark and me on one of our morning runs, our conversation easy and familiar. They interviewed Jake at his garage, asking about his perspective shift. "I thought I was being a good brother by not making a big deal out of her service," Jake told the camera. "I thought keeping things light and normal was what she needed. I didn't understand that what she actually needed was acknowledgement. Recognition that she'd changed, that her experiences mattered, that her reactions weren't funny, but were actually evidence of skills and training most people can't imagine." They filmed the two of us at Mom's facility, Jake and I navigating her care together, the shared burden bringing us closer. "Going through this with Mom," Jake said, "taking care of her together, it's shown me that Michelle's military training actually makes her better at this. She's calm in crisis, organized, able to make hard decisions without falling apart. The same things that made her a good officer make her a good daughter and sister." The filmmaker interviewed Sam Price, Rachel, several other veterans from our group. She interviewed Alex Chin, the reporter who'd done the original interview. She even got footage from the July 4th incident. Jake had saved it despite taking the post down and used it with proper context. When she showed us the rough cut in early January, I cried. Not from sadness, but from the truth of it. She'd captured something essential about the veteran experience, about the difficulty of coming home, about the way trauma and training intertwined. But she'd also shown hope, families learning to understand, communities stepping up, veterans finding purpose in advocacy. It's perfect, I told her. Don't change anything. The documentary premiered at a film festival in late January, then got picked up by a streaming service for broader release. Suddenly, the story I'd been living was available to millions of people. The exposure was intense, more speaking requests, more interviews, more attention than I'd ever wanted. But it also connected me with veterans across the country dealing with similar struggles. I got emails from active duty members preparing to transition, asking for advice. Messages from family members trying to understand their veterans better. Notes from civilians who'd never considered what military service actually meant until they watched the film. Mark handled the attention with his usual calm. It's a lot, he acknowledged. But if it helps people, it's worth the discomfort. Rachel was more enthusiastic. This is exactly what the veteran community needs. Real stories told honestly, showing both struggles and solutions. You two are doing important work. In February, the state senator who'd attended our first big speaking event invited us to testify before a committee considering veterans services funding. Mark and I spent a week preparing, working with veterans advocacy groups to understand the legislative landscape, the arguments we needed to make, the data that would support our personal stories. The testimony itself was intimidating. A formal hearing room, legislators taking notes, cameras recording for public record. But we told our stories clearly, connected them to specific policy needs, and answered questions with the same honesty we'd brought to all our speaking. 2 weeks later, the committee voted to increase funding for veterans transition services and family support programs. We'd made a tangible difference, turned personal struggle into policy change. Your father would be proud, Mom told me during one of her lucid moments. She'd been having fewer of those, but when they came, they were precious. You're helping people. That's what matters. Thanks, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't understand before. About what you were carrying. You understand now. That's enough. Jake's transformation continued steadily. He started volunteering at the Veterans Center, helping with practical things like home repairs for disabled veterans. He attended a family support group specifically for relatives of veterans with PTSD and combat trauma. He read books, watched documentaries, educated himself in ways he should have done months earlier, but was doing now with genuine commitment. One evening in March, we were sitting on the porch, our usual spot for important conversations, when he said, "I've been thinking about Dad. About how proud he'd be of you. Of what you accomplished, and how you're using it now to help people. He'd be proud of you too. For changing, for growing, for admitting when you were wrong and doing the work to be better." I'm trying. Still mess up sometimes. We all do. That's being human. The documentary continued to generate opportunities. A publisher reached out about turning my story into a book. A university invited me to speak to their ROTC program. A veterans organization wanted me to join their board of directors. Each opportunity required careful consideration. I didn't want my life to become only about my trauma, only about being a veteran spokesperson. I needed balance, needed to be Michelle Torres the whole person, not just Major Torres the advocate. Mark understood that instinctively. We're useful to the movement, he said. But we can't let the movement consume us. We still need our own lives, our own peace. So we set boundaries. Limited speaking engagements to twice a month maximum. Declined interviews that felt exploitative. Protected time for ourselves, for healing, for just being. By spring, life had found a rhythm. Mom was stable in her facility, as comfortable as someone with advanced dementia could be. Jake and I had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and honest communication. The advocacy work felt meaningful without being overwhelming. And I'd created a community of veterans and allies who understood both my past and my present. The fireworks video still existed online. Probably always would. But now it existed alongside the interview, the documentary, the advocacy work. The full story, not just the painful moment. Context that transformed mockery into understanding. I'd gone from being a punchline to being a voice for veterans who needed one. From being isolated in my struggle to being connected to a community that shared it. From feeling broken by my family's reaction to understanding that I'd never been broken at all, just changed by experiences they couldn't comprehend until I helped them understand. The journey wasn't over. It would never really be over. But I'd found my footing in this new life, built something meaningful from pain, and helped others do the same. That felt like victory enough. Memorial Day came around again, exactly 1 year since I'd first come home. The town was planning their usual parade and ceremony, and this time I was asked to speak. Not as Jake Torres' sister who'd been in the military, but as Major Michelle Torres, veteran advocate and community voice. I stood in front of my closet the morning of the ceremony, looking at my dress uniform. I hadn't worn it since coming home. Hadn't wanted to, really. It represented a version of myself I wasn't sure I could reconcile with who I'd become. But today felt right for it. The uniform still fit perfectly. Military precision meant taking care of your gear, and I'd maintained the habit. As I buttoned the jacket, adjusted the ribbons, looked at myself in the mirror, I saw both versions of myself. The officer who'd led troops in combat zones, and the woman who'd come home to mockery and found a way to turn it into purpose. Jake knocked on my door. "You ready? We need to leave in 10. "Yeah, come in." He stopped when he saw me. "Wow. I don't think I've ever seen you in full dress uniform. Haven't worn it since I got back. You look," he searched for words. "Like yourself. Like the real version of yourself I never really saw before." We drove to the ceremony together, Jake unusually quiet. Mom was having a bad day and couldn't attend, but we'd visit her later, tell her about it even if she didn't fully understand. The town square was packed. More people than I'd ever seen at a Memorial Day event. Partly because of the documentary, I suspected. People were curious about the local veteran who'd become a voice for others. But also because the community genuinely wanted to honor veterans, wanted to do it right this time. Mark was there in his Marine dress blues, sharp and professional. Rachel wore her Army uniform. Sam Price stood with other Vietnam vets, their presence a reminder that this struggle spanned generations. The continuity of it all struck me again, different wars, same challenges coming home. The mayor gave opening remarks, thanking veterans for their service. The high school band played patriotic songs. Then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the podium, looked out at the crowd. Saw Jake in the front row, saw familiar faces from the neighborhood, saw veterans I'd come to know over the past year, saw strangers who'd watched the documentary and wanted to be part of something that mattered. A year ago I was at a 4th of July party in my backyard. Fireworks went off, and I hit the ground out of instinct. My family laughed. They filmed it. And for a moment, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in 13 years of military service. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was listening. I tell you this not to shame anyone, but to illustrate a truth about military service that civilians often don't understand. We don't just serve during our active duty years. We carry that service for the rest of our lives. The training that keeps us alive in combat zones doesn't disappear when we come home. The experiences that shape us into warriors don't vanish when we put on civilian clothes. We remain changed by what we've seen, what we've done, and who we became in service to our country. I talked about Mark's intervention that night, how his willingness to speak truth changed the trajectory of my homecoming. About Jake's journey from ignorance to understanding. About the community of veterans who'd supported me. About the importance of creating spaces where veterans could be honest about their struggles without fear of judgment. Today we honor those who died in service to our country. But we also need to honor those who came home carrying invisible wounds. Who navigate civilian life with nervous systems trained for combat. Who love their families but struggle to connect across a gap of experience that can't easily be bridged. We honor them by trying to understand, by asking real questions, by creating communities that see veterans as whole people, not just uniforms or stereotypes. I looked directly at Jake. And sometimes, we honor them by admitting when we failed them and committing to do better. My brother did that. Our family did that. Our community is doing that. And I'm grateful. The speech lasted about 10 minutes. When I finished, the applause was respectful, subdued. Not for spectacle, but for understanding. People didn't need fireworks or fanfare. They needed truth, and I'd given it to them. After the ceremony, people lingered. Veterans approached to share their stories, civilians to ask how they could better support veterans in their lives. Jake stood nearby, answering questions about his perspective, about what it was like to learn you'd been hurting someone you loved through ignorance. It was humbling, I heard him tell someone. Realizing that my sister had lived through things I couldn't imagine, and instead of trying to understand, I'd made jokes. But the important thing is what you do after you realize you've messed up. You can get defensive, or you can do the hard work of actually learning and changing. Mark found me around noon. Good speech. Thanks. Felt right. You want to get lunch? Whole group's going to that diner on Main Street. Yeah, let me tell Jake. The diner was crowded with veterans and their families, everyone in good spirits despite the solemn occasion. We pushed tables together, ordered too much food, swapped stories. The conversation flowed easily, the way it does when people share fundamental understanding. Rachel leaned over at one point. You know what's different about this year versus last year? Everything. You belong here now. Last year, you were trying to fit back into a life that didn't really have space for who you'd become. This year, you've created your own space. Built your own community. Found your own purpose. That's the real homecoming. She was right. I'd stopped trying to be the Michelle who left at 22, stopped apologizing for being the Michelle who came back at 33. I'd claimed this version of myself, warrior and advocate, daughter and sister, survivor and thriver. All of it together, not divided into acceptable and unacceptable parts. That evening, Jake and I visited Mom at the facility. She was more present than she'd been in weeks, recognized us both immediately. How was the ceremony? She asked. Good, Mom. Really good. Michelle gave a speech. Of course she did. She's always been a leader. She took my hand. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Who you really were, what you really needed. You see it now, Mom. That's what matters. We sat with her until she got tired, until the lucidity faded and she drifted into confused questions about when Dad would be home. We answered gently, redirected carefully, stayed until she fell asleep. In the parking lot, Jake said, Do you think she'll remember today tomorrow? Probably not. But she knew it today. That's enough. Is it? Is any of this enough? I mean, you gave so much, and you came home to people who didn't appreciate it, didn't understand it, made it harder instead of easier. Does one good Memorial Day ceremony make up for that? I thought about his question. About the complexity of homecoming, the impossibility of ever fully reconciling military and civilian worlds, the ongoing nature of reintegration. It's not about one ceremony, Jake. It's about the journey from there to here. From mockery to understanding, from isolation to community, from shame to pride. The ceremony is just a marker along the way. The real victory is what we've all become through this process. And what have we become? Honest. Present. Willing to do the hard work of understanding each other across differences that seemed unbridgeable a year ago. That's worth more than any single event. We drove home through streets decorated with flags, past houses where families gathered for barbecues, past the VFW hall where more veterans were celebrating and mourning in equal measure. The town looked the same as it had a year ago, but everything had changed because of what had happened in between. At home, I changed out of my uniform, hung it carefully in the closet. The ribbons caught the light: Bronze Star, Air Medal, campaign ribbons from multiple deployments. Evidence of a life lived in service. Evidence of experiences that had shaped me fundamentally. But I was more than those ribbons now. More than the awards, the rank, the combat training. I was also the woman who'd turned humiliation into advocacy, who'd bridged the gap between military and civilian communities, who'd helped families understand their veterans and veterans understand themselves. I was Major Michelle Torres and I was Michelle Torres. Both. Always. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Good work today. Proud to know you. I smiled, typed back, likewise. See you Thursday at the meeting. Thursday. The Veterans Group. The twice-monthly gathering that had become a cornerstone of my life here. Not the only cornerstone, but an important one. Part of the web of connection I'd built, the community I'd found, the purpose I'd claimed. Outside, I could hear distant fireworks from someone's Memorial Day celebration. A year ago, that sound would have sent me spiraling. Tonight, I tensed slightly, took a breath, and let it go. The sound didn't change. But I had. And that made all the difference. I stood at my window, watching the night deepen, thinking about the year behind me and the years ahead. About Mom's decline and Jake's growth. About the veterans I'd help and the families I'd educate. About the continued work of bridging worlds, of translating experiences, of creating understanding where none had existed before. It wouldn't always be easy. Some days would be harder than others. Some people would never understand, no matter how clearly I explained. Some reactions would always be involuntary, some wounds would always be tender. That was the reality of carrying combat experience into civilian life. But I'd found my footing, built my community, claimed my purpose, turned my worst moment into my greatest advocacy. And I'd done it not by changing who I'd become through military service, but by insisting that everyone else see that person clearly, completely, and with respect. That felt like victory. That felt like peace. That felt, finally, like home. If this hit home, tap like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Questions for you. Have you ever been laughed at for a survival reflex or anxiety response? What happened next? If you were Jake, what would your first real apology sound like? Families of vets. How do you give warning before triggering noises, fireworks, balloons, etc.? Veterans. What helps you feel seen at family events? One thing civilians should stop saying, and one thing they should start doing. What is it? Drop your answers in the comments. Your story could help someone tonight.